Started. So welcome everybody to the Big Apple Film Festival mentor and networking sessions. Today we have Alec, is it Sokolow?
That's
Did I
good
say
enough. Yeah, sure.
Sokolow?
Yeah.
And he's going to be talking about, I want to specifically get the name of the panel correct because I'm not sure if this one has changed several times. How to write a film for mass audiences. So before we get started, I just want to let everybody know this is going to be a Q&A based session. So everyone is going to be muted throughout. If you have a question, at the bottom of your screen, there is a little reactions button. If you click that, there will be a menu that pops up. And on the bottom of the menu, there's a big bar that says raise hand. If you have a question, if you can hit the raise hand button, it'll make it very easy for us to see all the questions in order so we can get to everybody in a timely fashion. Please do not hit the buttons on the top, the little emojis on the top, because they do other things that are a little annoying and distracting. So try to refrain from hitting those. And then, so Alec, if you want to just give us kind of like a quick overview of, who you are, your background, and, how to write a film for mass audiences.
All right. Well, thank you. I guess just by way of introduction, I am Alec. I pronounce it Sokolow, but I had teachers that told me I was pronouncing my last name wrong. That it was like Sokolov or Sokolov, and I'm like, all right, well, I don't know. I have been a storyteller in Hollywood and a writer for hire my whole adult life. I was with a longtime writing partner, Joel Cohen. We were the first writers of Toy Story. We wrote the first 7 drafts and created Buzz and Woody on the page and to Infinity and Beyond and all that stuff. Before that, I struggled comically, but I learned how to be a writer in those struggles. And then after that, when the candy store opened, Joel and I kind of went on a pretty nice ride where we were able to write a bunch of other kind of movies that seem to find audiences, both Garfield movies and Cheaper by the Dozen, and we kind of a funny sausage making story, which I won't waste you guys' time on, but even Evan Almighty was really our template. And then, in a way that we couldn't have planned, we were brought on by Activision, and we helped launch a pretty big franchise for them as well, Skylanders, and did all the storytelling for that. So, just by way of introduction, I stopped counting a long time ago, but I probably have birthed about, I don't know, let's say 70 screenplays for hire, which is really my big accomplishment to myself, was like, is that people are willing to pay me to do this. A handful got made and have kind of fit the corridor of marketing and of mandates, and had a chance to be seen by a wide audience. And so along the way, can't say it was my intention, but I think I've kind of been conditioned and learned a little bit about how to put those things up on their feet. I'll start, and again, I don't know the level of everybody and your all experiences and stuff, and so I don't want to like patronize anybody, but I'll start by just saying that, like, for me, writing is writing, and if anything, I've also taught at NYU a handful of times. I've taught at other universities. I enjoy the mentoring process, but it's really that I find in the very like structural conversations and the narrative drive conversations of screenwriting, a lot of it's hero journey stuff. I just find that there's a quest for authenticity in every idea, and a quest for myself in every idea to like have an authentic experience in writing something. And so, just again, by way of introduction, that's how I see myself. Is I've produced, I've directed, I've done other things in the system, but I can't really let too many days go by where I'm not writing and not trying to write things that will find an audience. Trying to write things more important than an audience is find financing, find people who think my ideas are good enough for them to spend their time and money and the bullets in their proverbial guns, you know. So, as far as writing for mass audiences, and I'm going to speak extemporaneously because I know there's a Q&A, and I'm a real big believer that everybody has their own mandates, their own issues, their own things they're focusing on, and it's easy to pontificate, but basically, writers write, and writers are trying to kind of connect dots in their own process, and so I really enjoyed the conversation. I will say this. I mentioned the hero's journey. I'm a big proponent of the hero's journey, if not following it literally in all of my work, in just understanding that it lines up so beautifully with the 3-act screenplay structure, but there's a template there that could at least be a starting off point for understanding that every story, no matter how many bells and whistles and how many big things are on screen, everything is ultimately a journey within, and that movies for me exist to either show you a world that you never knew existed before, or show you your world in a way you never really saw before, and it's a transformational experience. Storytelling is transformational. Characters have to change. The world has to change. And so I start with those tenets. I start with those like building blocks when I'm like dealing with an idea. But what I really also, depending on the idea, depending on the notion, I tend to really try and focus on archetypes. And I feel that like archetypes are again, for mass audience, for like trying to reach that, archetypes are your best friend. And, there's no coincidence, even though I don't think this was planned, to be honest, that Buzz and Woody were a spaceman and a cowboy. And that right there, two American prototypical, archetypical heroes, where what it does, and I think this is true with all screenwriting, but especially the kind of writing that, the way audiences consume things, the way things are marketed, the way that like people are have an insatiable appetite for movie moments, is archetypes. You don't have to explain how and why somebody appears and communicates. You know what a cowboy is going to talk like. You know what a spaceman is going to talk like, or you can riff on it in your own way. But the audience knows it, and they have their expectations. I do believe that movies make archetypes out of every character. I think movies are kind of fetishes, if you will. They compress things and heighten things and romanticize every single moment, and every moment it can be so heightened. And I really believe that as a writer, especially as a writer trying to find financing and trying to find assets for projects that can be marketed, I'm a huge proponent in pacing, and I'm a huge proponent in screen moments. I care more about screen moments in some way than story points. I feel like if I can be delivering memorable screen moments, what they used to call trailer moments, the things that are going to be written inherently into the script that will sell the script, that's kind of my job, while also maintaining an earthbound emotional reality. So again, I'll leave at that, and that's kind of that's if you take one thing, just think about your characters as archetypes. I wrote a movie years ago called Money Talks with Joel, and I learned this lesson through Money Talks. This Money Talks had doesn't matter what the movie was, but basically in it you had a one character who was not really a criminal but was perceived to be a criminal, and you had one character who was a news reporter. And we ran into so many challenges in trying to figure out why either one of them would have a gun. Like why would a news reporter have a gun? And you had to explain it. It became like a character. It stopped the storytelling. If he was a cop, you don't have to explain it. That to me, again, is why I'm saying archetypes. It's like you want to kind of propel that. I also philosophically think that the goal, if you're writing in the spec game, but even for hire, is casting, and you're trying to get actors and actresses to want to come on and invest their own collateral into your ideas. And so you want, people want to play heroes. They want that perception of being a hero, and people want to play martyrs. And so I also tend to kind of put those ideas up on steroids, if you will, when I'm writing a little bit, especially first drafts, just to understand that like what I'm really trying to do is seduce. It's not even an actor or an actress; it's their manager or agent. I'm trying to seduce somebody to read my stuff and say, my client, this will further my client's career, just to get to them. So that's a big part. But like in the case of Buzz and Woody, Spaceman and the Cowboy, both very heroic figures. In the case of Garfield, which was a pre-existing brand, but you had this cat that was so ubiquitous, almost to the point in which it was overexposed, even when I was working with that title. But what you really had was a lazy hero, and I'm of a certain age, but I can tell you I grew up total geeking out on movies and movie comedies. And I used to love, when I was a kid, in New York City, I think on Sunday morning, they would show Abbott and Costello movies, and they would show Bob Hope movies. And Garfield to me was Bob Hope, like he was like the lazy hero, but he was a hero. And, as per nothing, and because of partially the way Joel and I were treated by Pixar, when Fox approached us on Garfield, we had no qualms with kind of ripping ourselves off in the storytelling of Garfield. And if you actually lay Garfield on top of Toy Story, you realize it's the same exact story. You know, again, story wasn't as important to us as character, and Garfield was going to be on the poster. Garfield was going to kind of be center in every scene. So like we just kind of, it's called writing to talent, but basically we wrote both of those movies where every scene was going to be like, how do we give Garfield the moment? How do we give Garfield the sense of adventure and the movie magic? And ultimately, then how do we take it, in his case, his big personality and his laziness and turn it into a vulnerability? So like those are things I think about constantly. I will tell you, and I'm not the only one to say this, and coming out of the strike last year, I think there was a lot of people who are saying this, like the industry is changing so much, and it's changed so much in the last 15 years, 20 years. And there's so much like pre-existing IP that is being funneled through the system as opposed to like original ideas as much as it used to. And so I even think that like, and you know, for writers trying to get from here to there, you're auditioning ultimately, not necessarily for your own material, but for somebody else's agenda to see what you can do, how you can play with what they have with their IP. But it still comes down to writing for the star. I tend to look at the stakes as like stakes and power are really two big things in screenwriting for me. You know, what are the emotional stakes? And the emotional stakes really are small and they're really intimate. But then who has the power and where is that tension kind of going to drive storytelling? I mean, again, that's kind of generic stuff, I think, for screenwriters. But like for me, I never stop asking myself that question. You know, who has the power? And then, in the case of, I tend to write a lot of family stuff. I tend to write a lot of animation. Maybe not in first drafts, but before I let anybody read anything, are there smiles, if not laughs, on every page? And I do that, but I don't start with that. I may have a couple ideas in my head. I really just start with like structure. Big proponent of 3-act structure, especially, and not looking to judge the greater audience, but I think, there was a phrase I heard as a younger writer that I've always kept in my head, which is, if you tell a joke to 100 people, they'll all tell you how to make the joke funnier. But if you wave a gun in front of 100 people, they'll all dive under the couch. And I think that a lot of the stories that travel around the world have that kind of primal understanding of stakes. It's why comedy tends to not travel as much as action. And so I do think in this world where, the reason why there's a second Garfield is because Garfield performed better outside of the United States than it performed inside of the United States. But with Asia being as big a market, and with Europe and with South America, I think that like looking at unifying principles that are global in the thematics and in the stakes also really is important when you're thinking about mass audience. You know, that's like for me, that's how I kind of start winnowing down what I think a good idea is. Like, is this something that somebody will understand in another culture? And if they will understand it, then chances are I have a chance of writing something that can be exploited around the world. So I mean, again, these are the things that I adhere to. But it's still writing, and writing is writing, and writing for me is you know uh, you're meeting your heroes and you're meeting the world just before it's about to change. Um, that's essential. That really the beginning of your screenplay is the ending of the pre-existing reality. Uh, Within that first act, you're going to have, Robert McKee would call it the inciting incident. Joseph Campbell would call it the call to adventure. Well, you'll have an incident that will alter the world and force your protagonist or protagonists to act. By the end of the first act, they'll go through whatever refusal of wanting to act or insecurity about wanting to act, but they'll go through needing to do something to then officially leap into an unknown reality. That tends to be the first act break. And then once they've made that leap, they can't go backwards. The second act tends to be an exploration of watching your protagonist in very uncomfortable or uncharted waters, where, again, in Joseph Campbell language, they'll meet enemies, they'll meet allies, they'll have tests. Everything is a test of character. Every action tests character, and ultimately leading, whatever story reversals and whatever devices you want to use as a writer, ultimately leading to the greatest crisis where the character has been tested so much that they have to really question who they were at the very beginning when you met them, and then hopefully get transformed by the test and by all of that, to the place in which they do become more heroic. They are able to actually achieve their dream or their goal. But as that's happening, the world has to kind of shift, and things have gotten even more unwieldy and potentially more fatal, if you will, thematically fatal, metaphorically fatal, and that tends to be your second act break, which pushes you to the end. And so I adhere to all of that stuff, but really, it's character, character, character. It's archetypes. It's movie moments, and it's understanding that I'm not looking to. I'll find myself. I'll find pieces of myself in a lot of the characters I've created or written, but I'm not looking to explain things. I'm hoping the action creates moments that the explanation is self-evident, and that there are unifying principles that people anywhere around the world will understand. It's, in the case of like family films, they can be limiting, but they're also, it's dad issues, it's bully issues, it's orphan fantasies, it's things that like Charles Dickens was playing with that still work and resonate with an audience of a certain age. In the case of like lower budgeted pieces, and I'll think about a movie like Coda, and when I say this, Coda hit a mass audience, but Coda was a very small movie. Well, why did that happen? In my opinion, it's because even though I don't know what it's like to be deaf or to be the parent of a deaf child, I do know what it's like to be aspirational and have the fear of being 18 years old, and will I find my way in the world? And am I different? And does my differences make me special, right? And so to me, those are big ideas in a small movie, and that's why I think a movie like that resonates. Then you can take a movie like Barbie, which is the most cynical uh, proposal for a movie, which they've tried to make for 30 years. And yet somehow Greta Gerwig and that whole team make a movie that, at least for me, felt very unique and satisfying because they actually found some authentic emotion. What's it like to be perfect and want to actually feel something, and in the world of mass market, like the meta-ness of that movie. So to me, it's almost like, when this is called writing for a mass audience, it's about finding that thing that everybody can relate to, and then hopefully not having to explain it with dialogue, explain it through the world building, explain it through the tests and the tension that you're going to create as a writer. And if you have to write for budget, then you do need more dialogue, and you actually need to rely more on performance than on bells and whistles. So, I mean, I would imagine this stuff is self-evident if you haven't already explored it. But that tends to be like, that's the list that I tend to pray to. I'm a big Billy Wilder fan, and he has the Ten Commandments, and that I still read before I let anybody else read my script. Just to see if I'm making any mistakes, or if I could be a little bit more eloquent in my writing. And like I said, I like to think big. I like to think about a king's court. I like to think about the hierarchy of power, and either character made or the power of the universe, the power of having to get from point A to point B. And like, just know that, like, in a way, there's a phrase like about jazz where it's like, there's only 12 notes. It's how you play them. This is how you play them, right? This is how you guys and women, this is how you play them. But yeah, that's how I tend to look at it. And like I said, it's a separate conversation, but my career experience, if not advice, is just that, 99 out of 100 times the script I'm writing may never get made. But what I'm really doing is I'm auditioning for something where somebody has a mandate, and they now see that I can help them. And that's how I tend to see how I fit in as a pure screenwriter. That's what I got. I mean, I really would like to talk to everybody and engage in a conversation, because I would imagine anybody that's been writing, you've been dealing with a lot of the stuff I've been sharing. I see a thing. Where can I find Billy Wilder's Ten Commandments on writing? I think you could just Google it, and it's probably will pop up. You know, they're simple, but like they're like one of them is like, if you're using voiceover, never say what you can show. There's a question: is there any market for spec scripts? Have you ever sold a spec?
Yeah, I know Ron has a question. So I'd like to, if we could, guys, just go through the hand, because it'll get too crazy if we just start going through the chat. So Ron, I know you had a question. You've been waiting. So you should have a prompt to unmute.
I have a lot of questions, but the first one that I just typed, I'm a little confused about whether we're supposed to type our questions or speak our questions. In any event, my question is the spec script question, which is it possible today to sell a spec script? And secondly, have you ever sold a spec script?
Yeah, so I think it's always possible. One of my favorite lines about the entertainment industry is there's only one rule in show business, and everybody's still trying to figure it out. Like I don't know if there's ever a time where people don't want material, but I think the challenges of selling a spec script has gotten at the moment in the last decade a little bit more complicated, because it's everything is about pre-existing IP and comic books, and now video games. Video games are the new comic books. It's like, I've heard that like from multiple people, where it's just like video game IP is now going to get funneled into their system like comic books had been. Have I sold a spec script? Yeah, Money Talks was a spec script. Actually, there's and I say this, I I don't know how this is going to come up, but I have a movie out right now in Europe that I beg people not to watch. It's really horrible. But it was a spec script. It was like a script that Joel and I wrote and actually sold 3 times, and always built an off ramp into our deal and an animated script. And when time had gone by and it wasn't a move into production, we would get it back. And we ended up selling it to a Belgian company the 3rd time. And they unfortunately hacked it up and actually made it. So I have sold spec scripts. I could tell you and I don't think this is necessarily earth shattering, but like in the spec script world, you need an actor or a director. And if you don't have them, then the person buying the script has to have them. And when I have sold live action spec scripts, it's because there was an actor that Money Talks was that. Money Talks was like this first script Joel and I ever wrote together. It took us 5 years to sell it. Joel even said at one point, "We're going to sell this right now." There's somebody who hasn't become famous, and when that person becomes famous, we'll sell the script. And he was right. It was Chris Tucker. And so, and the reason that script sold is because New Line, which I don't know if New Line even exists anymore, New Line wanted to make a movie for Chris Tucker, and we just happened to have it. Here it is. And they were like, great. So I've gone through a lot more not selling spec scripts. I've written a lot of spec scripts in my career and continue to. I do it as much neurotically because I just don't like to be idle. But it's challenging. But really, it's if you just kind of think about the engineering of it all, you need money. And you need distribution, and both need marketing, and marketing needs actors, and and the rare director. And so even there, like writing for mass market, my characters, my A character, my star, I'm if not thinking of a specific actor in mind, I am thinking about how do I make this attractive to the actors and actresses.
All right, and I know Ron, you've had a couple questions. If you do have more questions, just throw your hand up in the chat. I just want to make sure I'm able to get to everybody. So right now we do have Max that had a question, so I'm going to go to Max.
Thanks, Alec. Thank you for your time today, and thank you to Biagio for hosting. Alec, it's a pleasure to hear everything you just said. I'm also a huge proponent of the hero's journey. And hearing you, I think we all know Toy Story follows it beautifully, like to a T. Using it in comedy, I find like, well, I have 2 questions. There's so many things running through my brain. It's really a pleasure to hear everything you just said for the last 30 minutes. I wish I could write faster. My questions are twofold, and I think they're easy. One, you said when I have a day where I don't have something planned to write, I write. So my first question is, do you have like a daily writing practice, or if you don't know what you're going to do you have like some prompts you always fall back on or something? And then my second question is, I don't have a writing partner, but I've always loved that. Would you talk a little bit about your experience as someone who has worked a long time with a writing partner? And I know not every writing team works the same way, but would you tell a little bit about how you and Joel work together?
Did I freeze or did you freeze?
Am I frozen?
You're not frozen. Am I frozen to people?
No, you're not frozen.
You are not frozen to us.
Okay.
If there's an issue, if if there is any issue, just throw it in the chat. That'll usually go through, and I'll see if I can alleviate on our end or kind of manage it.
So here's my relationship to writing. Everybody writes differently. Mark Twain wrote in his pajamas. Henry Mankiewicz wrote drunk. Everybody writes differently, and so what works for me doesn't necessarily work for anybody else. I have found, for both emotional and psychological issues, that if I enjoy days when I don't write, but if I don't write, anxiety starts to grab me in my life. The monkey brain starts to happen, and I get very, I just get uncomfortable. So what I tend to do, and again, this is me, is I tend to associate writing with exercise. I tend to wake up in the morning and I exert myself in some way for a half hour or an hour, and get the endorphins and pop and all that stuff. And then I tend to keep banker's hours. I tend to start writing, if not 9:30, 10, somewhere in the morning, and I write until my brain gets mushy, and then I put it away, and then I may come back to it a couple hours after that. But I tend to I my experience has been I tend to have anywhere between 2 and 4 good hours a day, and everything else is just kind of bullshit. And it's not bad to have bullshit. Like in the case of screenwriting, sometimes you're laying bricks, and you just got to lay bricks, and you don't have to be brilliant. You just have to kind of have things in the right place and can go back and sculpt. But that tends to be my own writing habits. I I think about movies a lot. I think about the scripts I've tried to write, scripts I'm writing, the movies that have actually gotten made. I'm constantly like living in that space, and then obviously all the movies I get to watch and read. But I really try and be very calculated. I don't write a scene to discover the scene. I try and like think about the scene before I write it, and think, what is it I really want to say in the scene, and now what's the most original way of saying it, of hiding it, of not saying it but saying it. I'm big into subtext in my scripts. I'm big into the on the page. Like the biggest compliment I've ever gotten, and I've gotten it enough times to know that it exists, is the writing jumped off the page, or I started reading and I whipped through it. Right? I want the scripts to be easy to read, but I don't want them to be dumbed down. So it's really about creating dynamics on the page and looking at the scene and having a philosophy of like, where's the most important information going to be within the scene? How do I want to show the information? And if I'm going to use dialogue to show it, how do I do that with subtext in the dialogue? And if I'm going to do it with action, how do I create a juxtaposition of action and dialogue that actually says what I want to say? And so I tend to focus on those things in writing, and especially in first drafts, and forgive myself a lot, because the rough draft is just not going to be very good, and I just forgive myself. I'm just like, all right, I don't use the term vomit draft, but I know that's a term, and like I'll vomit it out. I'll just go. I'm a big believer in framework, and so I'm always thinking about the framework, and I'm always thinking about like, how does this work in this framework, and what are the past precedents? What are the movies I can look to as comps in my head that I can be inspired by? I will tell you, and I steal from Buster Keaton, and I steal from Kevin Hart, and I don't think it's stealing. I think it's like looking at it, saying that worked. Why did that work? I need something similar. How can I do it in my way? But it's not like I was alone on a mountaintop. It was like, oh, it kind of channels in a way. As far as writing with a partner, I've done both. What I love, Joel and I worked together for a long time, and what I loved about Joel, even though you can build resentments in partner dynamics pretty easily, is the work was always really good, but we had kind of a basic understanding. If I couldn't convince him of an idea, or he couldn't convince me of an idea, then we both kind of knew then chances are we couldn't convince a third person. And so it was a way of just like making sure. But Joel and I are very, very different human beings, very, very different sensibilities. And when we wrote together, we did not see the same ideas in the same way. And so I think that collision was very helpful, while also we genuinely liked each other, even though I still wouldn't say we were ever friends. Like, I don't think we had social plans more than 5 times in 25 years. Like, it's just, we got together for very targeted reasons, and we enjoyed it as much as we could. But it's writing can be very isolating, and so it was a chance to kind of be on a spaceship with somebody. The downside of partnerships, ego, and sometimes the delineation of work, and who's actually lifting the heavy freight can sometimes get in the way. And sometimes one of us would move off an idea and it would get frustrating. But it obviously worked for me, so I did it for a long time. And then I've written alone also for a long time. And the plus side is I get to make my own schedule. The downside is very monastic, and I'm alone a lot, and that can kind of not be fun, But I enjoyed having a partner, and I saw the merits of it. In my case, Joel, I did all the actual inputting. I did all the actual quote unquote writing. Joel would be in the room. We'd talk things out. I'd hammer it out. We'd read it, whatever. But Joel kept his eye on like the prize. He kept his eye on Hollywood and the world more than I did. And he was always much better at like navigating that part of being a screenwriter. And so I would lean on him for that, and he would lean on me for the fact that I could generate pages, and I could be like, I know what has to happen in the next 5 scenes. Let me just go, But yeah, I would say if you enjoy each other's company, if you can kind of put ego at the door, it's a collaborative business, and you're trying to always convince people that your ideas are good. And so why not start with somebody that's not family and friends and somebody that's going to shine you on, and instead like somebody that can be critical and say no or yep, and you could do the same,
So just real quick, and I'll let you go. So that's fascinating to me. I have 2 friends that wrote for Letterman for a long time, and exactly like you said, he said I was always the one sitting here typing while David walked around the desk, and we talked the whole time. But if you guys had so few social plans together, or you weren't like, I don't know, super friends, how did you meet originally?
Well, I started in late night.
Together?
Yeah, no, I started in late night television. And when I moved out to LA to start my writing career, I got hired on. I got hired on 2 shows on Fox that were late night shows, and one of the producers, one of the shows, they had a temporary host that I got hired to work with, Arsenio Hall, and so when he started his show, I was one of his first hires. But one of the producers on those shows, when I was unemployed, I reached out to him, pre-social media. I only knew 5 people. I called him, I'm like, I need a job. You have anything? And he's like, I've got something, but you got to work with this guy. And that's how I met Joel. And it was a little TV thing. Never came to fruition, but it got us talking. And Joel's about 10 years older than me, and he had a couple movies made already. And we, about 9 months to a year after we met, we said, hey, why don't we write a script together? Then we wrote another one. And actually, what's really funny is the first script we wrote was Money Talks, became a movie. The second script we wrote was called The Wooden Policeman, live action, kind of R-rated dark comedy about kids and guns and toy guns in New York City, very gritty, whatever. Had a character Buzz and a character Woody in it. And we never made a penny on that script. We couldn't fucking stick it on a wall. And it was a complete bomb, but it was a pretty good writing sample. And that was a script that Disney and Pixar read that got us in the door for Toy Story.
All right. I know Ron had another question. Ron, so you need to unmute. I have a request.
Okay, yeah, age-old problem. I have a finished script. I think it's marketable. I think it's for a mass market audience. I think it has a lot going for it. How do you get it seen? How do you get it to the right people? Do you have to have an agent? Yes, no. Can you use Internet Movie Database to get contact information if you do IMDb Pro?
Yeah, it is an age-old question, and I wish there was a simple answer. The reason why you need an agent or a manager or a lawyer is a lot of places won't read without that. They just won't take unsolicited material. And a good agent knows what's going on with all the buyers. Good manager does too, right? So it's an asset for you. If somebody says, what you just wrote, these people may like, and I know how to get to them, and they'll accept the submission. In the world we live in now, there's so many ways to contact people. And I don't know if that necessarily is effective, but I think there could be workarounds to that. Again, I can tell you, like I mentioned the wooden policeman, but we got the Toy Story opportunity because Joel was at a barbecue and talked to somebody whose husband was a executive at Disney Animation and went over and said, what do you got for us? We were nobody at the time. And he said nothing, although we have this like one kind of pet project of Michael Eisner's, and we need writers, and no writer with a career is going to do it at this moment. So that's how, it was just dumb luck, right? And so I wish I had a better answer, but I think I've always looked at my job as a writer as like, I'm going to create an asset, this document. It's a blueprint. It's a marketing, pamphlet. It's everything. And then I'm going to try and get it into the hands of somebody whose job is to know how to get it to people or who has a relationship. I think the entertainment industry stands on three pillars, money, relationships, and ideas. And as a creative, I've kind of made peace with the fact that I'm an ideas person. I don't really have money, and I have the relationships I have, but I don't really feed myself with the relationships. I feed myself with the ideas. And so, you had mentioned before, you have some pre-existing IP and you have a script now. So you have the idea, you need the money and you need a relationship. Like if somebody has one of those things, they can have a career. If somebody has two of those things, they can have a great career and be powerful. If somebody has three of those things, they're kings and queens, right? So that's how I tend to look at the entertainment industry.
All right, and I know Max had his hand up again, but I just want to throw it out there. We don't have a ton of time, so if anyone else does have any questions, I would encourage them to ask.
I just discovered that if I do this with 2 thumbs up, apparently fireworks go off behind me. Don't know how that happened, but thank you, Zoom.
Okay.
Alec, so I was just Googling you to see if you do coaching or mentoring, and I'm so glad to see that you do, because I was going to see if I could, reach out to you. You said, two things. Again, sorry. I just want to recap one thing you said, because I thought it was really powerful. You said, you ask yourself, what do I want to say in the scene? And then how do I say it in an original way? Is that right? Like, so not in a cliche way, like I don't want to finish the sentence the way everyone thinks I'm going to finish it. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, and I think that in all movies, but especially in in comedy, so much comedy is pacing, just pacing. And I think that it tends to be towards the end of the second act, storytelling stops for speeches. That is like the Oscar speeches that you tend to hear tend to happen in the second part of the second act of most movies. But until then, I think a lot of it is pacing. And I think that I like to activate the reader, and I try and activate the viewer. And I want them to be doing the math in their head. What is it I'm watching? And what am I really feeling? And so what's the real story that's being told? And so, yeah, I don't know how successful I am at that, but that's what I aspire to when I write. It's like I don't want to say I am hungry. You know, I want it to be obvious or self-evident or in the subtext. And so I think that over the years, I feel like that has been very effective, and effective, not effective for a couple of reasons, but one of them is just that the reader will keep reading because they've been activated. You know, you're painting a picture as opposed to like telling somebody something. So I'm a big proponent of that in my own writing.
All right, and I believe Lockie, I hope I said that right. Lockie has a question.
You did say it right. Alec, so great to meet you. Thank you for your time. So currently, another person on this call, we're co-writing an animated feature that's a musical. And
Nice.
it feels like with the way the industry is just drastically changing, it feels like such a futile effort sometimes that we're creating this big immersive world with all these anthropomorphized like animals in a subterranean world. And, you know, I'm finding myself kind of in the process of writing just this like looming fear that we're not creating something that's like a low-hanging fruit idea of something that's going to be like easily acquired. I was just curious if you could give any encouragement to us as we're trying to like just make the best thing possible with the story we're trying to tell, and kind of detaching ourselves from what the market is currently looking like and doing and wanting. Do you have any encouragement for us as we're in the creative process?
Uh, do you have the music already?
Yeah, we have almost all it. Yeah, there's 8 tracks that are written. So previously, I am a family media producer who's worked primarily in the audio theater space for families. And so this would be the first thing that's moving something visual. Yeah, but all the music is written for it already.
Yeah, I mean, again, because and is it a musical in the classic musical definitions where like when the song comes, the storytelling stops, and now you have a celebration of an emotional.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so um, first of all, I love how musicals never die. Like I think it's always amazing to me in movies. Forget theater, right? But like in movie terms, there's always the fear that like it's not going to work or it doesn't work or nobody's doing it, and then when it works, you know, it works. Everybody loves it. Audiences love it. So I think on some level, it's an evergreen, even though any movie that ever gets made can feel like a miracle just in having it made. But the bigger question, which I think is an emotional question, which I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, but I think that writing is very quixotic as screenwriting. Like screenwriting is the most bizarre obsession because if you're lucky, if you're lucky, maybe 500 people will read your words. Maybe. But millions will experience your thoughts. So but you have to write with words, right? You have to write. And so I make every movie in my mind. I'm always disappointed when things don't sell or when the marketplace doesn't work. And I feel like Charlie Brown with the football a lot of like, why did I just spend a year doing that? But I also kind of recognized in my life that like my life is better for the quixotic attempt, right? For the actual process. I think a writer writes, a creative creates. And so, and I know, I mean, I'm not, money's important. Self-esteem is important. Critical acceptance is important. But when I'm writing, I'm doing it because I need to do it inside of me. I need to do it, right? I need to like, my day is better living in that space. And when I say better, without being too maudlin, I don't have dark thoughts. I'm not self-destructive. I'm a better human being, son, brother, partner, everything, right? And so I separate my result from the process, and I think any day that I can write tends to be a better day. But as far as the industry, I don't know. The industry fucking is horrible right now, and it has been, the pandemic into the strike. It's been horrible. I'm hoping 2024 it starts to return to something, but I don't know. And yet, what I would say is, and much like the wooden policeman with me, what you're writing now may never get made, but it may give you the opportunity to change your life. And that's the calling card, right? And that's what you control and your partner. And that's what, like, you get to actually put something out in the world, and you just don't know how it's going to get received or what the opportunity may be. So I would just say the key is to be good. And if you're good, hopefully you'll have opportunity. If not on this, on something else.
Excuse me. All right. And I just want to take a quick sec because we are coming into the end of our call. So I just want to let everybody know, a lot of you have been on these calls before, so you're already aware. These sessions are recorded. So within the next 48 hours or so, everyone should be getting an email with a link to the recording of the session, as well as a link to our LinkedIn group that we encourage you to join and keep in touch on. We are, like I said, wrapping it up. So I think we probably have time for one or two more. So I see Ron has his hand up, so I'm going to give it back.
Hi, and you have a lot of wisdom. I'd love to be mentored by some of it. How do we contact you?
All right. Well, I do have a website, alecsokolowconsulting.com. You can go look in that and find me there, and email me from there, and we can have a conversation.
Okay, thank you.
And you can take me to lunch.
Okay.
All right. And I see Max has his hand up as well.
I am hoarding all the questions. I hope what I'm asking helps these other people, Alec.
You're muted, Max.
Sorry about that. My fault.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry. Okay, good. I'm back. I hope me hogging questions is helping other people, because everything you've said is like, I'm finding I've taken quite a few of these webinars, and Alec, this is like so helpful, maybe because I feel so akin to that anxiety of needing to create. Could you talk about TV? Could you talk about taking, I'm sure through your life you've written a 30-minute pilot or of some kind, you've pitched something. Could you talk about how you approach structure and keeping that structure like Hero's Journey-ish, which is so valuable, and putting it into a 30-minute show, then including like a season, an arc of a season, or a character over
Yeah.
something.
I had a TV pitch this just before this Zoom. Here's the thing, right? Basic rule of thumb: movies are statements, right? Something gets said. There's a beginning, middle, and end. Closed narrative statement. And TV historically has been conversations. The world doesn't necessarily change. The characters don't necessarily change, but the conversation on any episode happens, and that's what tends to drive episode and episodic television. And so I think that when I've tried to pitch TV and when I've tried to work in TV, I tend to look at TV as like, it's like you're trying to create the formula for Coca-Cola and then just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and have interesting things. It's why it's called a situation comedy, right? In the case of half hours or 11 minutes or however they want to break it down. And so I tend to not be as like consumed with a theme as I am with like, what's the conversation? What's a typical episode going to look like? What's the, who are the characters? What are the voices that are going to exist in this world? And then I tend to tap dance a little bit because I like standalone episodes, but I love limited series and I love narrative arcs. And so I tend to read the room a little bit and, you know, talk out of both sides of my mouth a little bit when it comes to that. But for me, I think in movies, and I think in kind of linear statements. And so I tend to look at arcing that way. And in television, I think it's just it's a conversation. It's not a statement. So it's like you're trying to invite a conversation. Video games were like that also. Video games were even more of a conversation because everybody's writing their own story when they play their own game. So as a writer of a video game, you know the answers, but you don't want to present answers. You just want to present questions and then let people find the answers.
All right, Alec, thank you so much. We only have a couple minutes left. Do you have any just kind of like final thoughts to, you know, leave with people? And I know you had mentioned your website, you know, or if there's anywhere else like your social media or whatever.
Here's what I would say. Like I'm a big, all right. I know he's fallen out of popularity for any number of reasons, but like one of my favorite lines, Woody Allen, I think once said something tantamount to, in life, there's only two conditions, either you're terminal or you're miserable. So you should be happy you're miserable. And like for me, I think that like, you got to love the struggle. You got to love the tension. You got to love your anxiety with the tension. You don't have to like it, but you got to love it. And you got to know that like, even if what you're working on doesn't necessarily give you what you think it's going to give you, it's giving you something else. It's giving you an inner life. It's giving you a chance to like walk through your day seeing magic. And so I try to like really focus on what do I control? I control my output. I don't control how people perceive my output. So I try to like construct my day and my life on how can my creativity and my creations exist, and then I bring them to market. And so what would I say is I think everybody has a story to tell. I think everybody can learn what I've learned. I think you learn by doing, and writing is not easy. And even with AI, it's not easy. It's like, it's hard. It's hard to be authentic. It's hard to like have a voice. It's hard to say something in a way that only you can say it. But I also think that it's that quest for authenticity that makes writers the most heroic of all the people that are trying to work in show business. So that's what I think.
Well, Alec, thank you so much for being here with us, everybody. Keep in mind, like I said, watch out for that email that's going to be coming through in the next 48 hours or so. I believe it comes through as a Vimeo link because someone was asking if it was a file. So it does come through, I believe, as a Vimeo link. And let's keep in touch on the LinkedIn group, and I'll see you guys all next time. Thank you so much, Alec.
All right, bye, guys. Good luck, everybody.
Have a good one.